3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the panel. Before we start the panel, we have a presentation, so we'll quickly go over that presentation. But welcome, good morning. Let's start. This panel is all about enhancing our regional participation in IETF, both from the region perspective as well as in general, like why are the operators from our region not showing up at the IETF? So before we jump into that, the first thing that we'll do is talk about what IETF is. It's not moving to the next slide. Yeah. Perfect. So this is our agenda. I'll quickly give you an introduction. Then we have two area directors in the room. So they will give you an introduction of what's hot in their respective areas, what are the new BOFs that are happening in the upcoming IETF meeting, new working groups, all that jazz. And then we have some trends in regional and operator participation. Why should operator care? And then we will have a nice little panel discussion followed by open mic. So that's our agenda for the day. So let's start. The first thing that we will do is talk about introduction to the IETF. This is our mission, the mission statement of IETF, which is in RFC 3935. As you know, in IETF, everything is published in RFCs. And our mission is make the internet work better by producing high quality, relevant, technical documents that influence the way people design, use, and manage the internet. So what are the key ethos when it comes to IETF? Everyone may participate. There is no membership. There is complete free and transparency in terms of participation. All our outputs is available for free. So you can go and look at all our published documents, and not just published documents, as we have made progress towards those things. So all our meeting minutes, all our slides, all internet drafts, all of them are completely available free. So that gives us transparency. It gives us openness in our process. And the way we decide is based on what we call rough consensus, which is all about judging whether the technical output meets the technical merits. And it's based on that, not based on votings or other mechanisms that some other bodies might use. One of the key things also is we don't have a protocol police of sorts. We write the document. Whether those things actually get deployed, it depends upon people in this room, like people who are operating the network, whether they believe that they want to deploy this feature, whether they want to enable it, and how they want to use it. It's completely voluntary in nature. One thing that people assume IETF does is that we have a grand plan about internet and we have something of how all the pieces come together. In fact, what we do is actually work on tiny Lego blocks, and how those Lego blocks are connected to build our systems. That's done by operators, etc. But IETF, we focus on producing a block that is easy to specify, where our interfaces are clear, and how you interconnect them is up to the industry. And that gives us innovation. It gives us people to use the protocols in new and innovative way without coming to IETF and asking our permission to use your Lego blocks. You do what you want to. That's the way how we have built the internet. Our process first is like, before we jump to the process, the key idea is, why do we even talk about standards? In our industry, standards are one of the fundamental things over which we have built this industry in a way. All our vendors, like I work for our vendors, we have folks in the room who are working for different vendors. We all need to come together and define how we are going to run a particular protocol. So the idea of interoperation is key. When you are an operator, you have devices from multiple vendors. When you are running a service, you have a web browser and a web server done by completely different set of people. So we need to make sure that they all interop with each other. That's how we have built our global internet. But to do that, one thing that we have done is, of course, make sure that it's easier for any new player to come and participate. So all our material, as I was mentioning, is available free for charge. So anybody can go and read an RFC and go and build a product around it and deploy things on their own. And everything is based on technical quality and voluntary deployments. Few of us who are on the leadership, sometimes people come and tell us like why IETF is not doing something. And we have the answer like, IETF is a bottom-up organization. As a leadership, we can't go and dictate. All we can do is facilitate. So when there is work coming in, if you want something to change at the IETF, it needs to be bottom up. It needs to happen at the working group level. And then the leadership can help in facilitation. So it's completely based on uh, actually doing the work on the ground and rough consensus. There's no voting. Within the technical merit, the working group chairs, the ADs, the IETF last call, during our process, everything is based on how we judge via rough consensus. This is all the work that we do. And in networking, we like our network layers. So everything below IP, things like Wi-Fi and 5G, that's outside of ITF. But starting at below internet layer, that's where all our fundamental IP, IPv6, DNS, DHCP, NTP, all our core IP protocol comes in, over which we have routing, where all the routing protocols, traffic engineering, all MPLS, those things. Over this, we have web and internet transport, which is actually a new area. It's been around a year now that we have done it. In the last episode, we did talk about how this new area came about and what was the reason for that. So we have both set of web-based protocol like HTTP and all the transport protocol, quick TCP, UDP, all that thing happens in the WIT area. Over this is ART. That's where all our application protocol, WebRTC, email, all those things comes in. Irrespective of all the layers, you need to do security in everything. So that's why security is a pillar. Similarly, you need to operate and manage all of these protocols, whether it is from IP up to DNS and email and routing. You need a way to operate and manage your network. So that's why ops area is another pillar. So this is how we arrange our work in ITF. We are a global community. So let's look at some of the numbers. This is from one of the last meetings at ITF. We still have a big participation coming from US. From our region, there's China, there's Japan, India to some extent. So these are some of the new participants, big participants from our region. But otherwise, it is US and EU, which is the biggest chunk of participation in-person participation. But that's just the meeting. Beyond the meeting, our actual work happens on the mailing list. So if you look at our community, which is not just the people who are coming to the meeting, but who are participating via our mailing list. So those are some of our numbers from 2023. We haven't crunched the number of 2024, so that's why we have little older data here. But that gives you the scope of what's the ITF community like. If we look at geography, this is again from the community point of view rather than meeting participation. We have big chunk from US and Europe, and then around 11% from Asia. So this is still a small number, and that's the reason we are doing this thing. So let's discuss, let's figure out ways on how we can improve on this number somehow. And then, of course, we have the gender angle, and as you can see, again, it's a pretty big skew. We have around 85% who are men, around 7.8% women, and then transgender and non-binary. But this is something that all our community, irrespective of the region, we need, and even in our apricot and APNIC community, something that we need to think more about. We believe in rough consensus and running code. So that's have been our motto. Everything is based on what's not only good on paper, but something that's been implemented, that's already interopt. So if you bring the running code, you get a say in the working group process as well. This is our structure of how ITF is. Everything happens in the working group, which is the gray boxes. Those working groups are arranged into areas. We have a couple of the area directors in the room as well. We have ITF has a sister organization, which is doing long-term research. That's IRTF. We co-locate our meetings, and there are working groups and research groups meetings that happen at the same time. We have Internet Architecture Board, and above that, we have all the admin stuff, the trust, which takes care of our IPRs, and RFC editors, which does the publishing of our RFCs as well. We have some new members seated in the March meeting, so that will be a change happening here as well. So moving to IAB. IAB looks at, and I'm one of the IAB members, We look at long-term technical direction, architectural oversight, and so we published our own IAB RFCs. We do workshops. While the the ISG and the IETF is doing the actual standard work, we are taking a step back and looking at a bigger picture and broader long-term direction. That's the thing that we do. So we have various activities at IAB page as well. The process-wise we believe in open participation, complete transparency, and distributed decision-making. It's like, even if you are in the leadership, it's never one person that takes the decision. It's a body, it's a consensus. It's within those processes, we do things. So everything is all about rough consensus, not about voting. The way we get people into our leadership position is also kind of unique. It's via nom-com committee, which are 10 random people from our community who receive all the feedback from the rest of the community, deliberate, and then propose who should be on our leadership process. So it's pretty unique process that works quite well. When it comes to our documents, RFCs is our primary output, and many people would be aware of RFCs, but may not be aware of the organizations that are behind that. The RFCs are our archival publications. Note that all RFCs are not standards. So there are informational, there are experimental, especially IRTF and other folks publish informational and experimental RFCs. Standards are done within the IETF. And also there are other streams, like I was mentioning, IAB publishes document as well. IRTF does. There's an independent stream. Various different RFCs are available. So looking at the metadata of RFCs is important to figure out what's the background of that. But while we are proposing things, that's done in a way of an internet draft. You would have seen those names around, draft IETF something. That is when it's adopted by one of the IETF working groups, and when draft personal name, draft Dhodi something, that's still work in progress. This is initial proposal that has not been adopted yet. So when it comes to engaging, all our working groups material are open. Mailing lists are easy to join. All you need is an email. And once you have joined the mailing list, you are part of the working group. You can join our meetings. We meet 3 times a year. We usually do Asia, Europe, and America. Next meeting is actually in Bangkok. So apart from attending meeting in person, there is a very good remote participation model as well. And we have been doing remote participation in IETF much before COVID, much before the pandemic thing as well, which made everybody else move to this model. And we believe in remote participation and in-person participation in the same level. For instance, when you join the queue, it's the same queue, whether it is whether you are in the room or remote, is the same queue. So it gives you a feeling that like we value the contribution of remote folks at the same levels. And that's how I suggest to people who are new to the IETF to attend meeting remotely first, get a feel of how the IETF works. And then when you show up in person, things becomes a little bit easier to understand how it is happening. And IETF believes in providing remote fee waivers as well. So if you are, though there is a fee involved initially, but if for some reason that's a barrier for you, no question asked, free waivers are available for remote participation as well. This is about bringing new work to the IETF. We will talk about some of the BOFs, so that will cover this as well. And next, let me give to our area directors who will go over some of the hot topics in their area. We have an upcoming meeting in Bangkok in next month, which is 15 to 21 March. So this is a good way to learn what are the hot topics that will be discussed in the IETF meeting. Ganda.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. I see some familiar faces and I see some faces I've never seen before. The last group is actually, the biggest group here. So is this thing working? Yes. Okay. Put it closer to me. I'm like really big, yeah. Hold on, the thing is not. Voila. Voila. Ooh. See, I'm not used to standing in front of a micro here, so a little bit an awkward position. So I'm actually one of the routing directors at IETF. I think it is probably like the most interesting, area you can actually be at this particular event. So I'm very proud to be a representative there. So now before I go over, my list of, potentially interesting topics for you, just out of interest, who of you actually, works with routing in your area? See, so that's why I think it is the most important part because almost everybody touches this. So, which is, I think pretty sure Zets will ask the same thing, but it will maybe not get as an appealing result out of this thing. So let's see. So, so I'm gonna try to summarize rather briefly some of the hot topics in my area, and and maybe not all of them. Maybe some of them you're aware of, other ones you may be less aware of. Some of these hot topics may be, items which you completely disgust and dislike, but that's okay because we at IETF, we work at everything. Eh? So good ideas, bad ideas, they all have to work perfectly well as such. Now, the first area, which is always interesting, is the evolution of SRv6. So that is, a topic which you may be involved with, may not be involved with. But at IETF, this thing is, very alive as such. And the SRv6 technology, has now already been out there for quite a while. And what we are seeing is that people are starting to really deploy this technology in their infrastructures. And as a result of that, operational experiences are beginning, are starting to happen also. And even though, so IETF developed SRv6, but to make it deployable and to make it actually work very well in an interoperability. Now you see I'm not really a native English speaker, so I struggle over these difficult words with many syllables. So even operation actually has to be interoperable, amongst different vendors, amongst different operators. Your experience is very, important because we need to document those things on how to, enhance technology to improve it. So, and that is actually one of those areas where SRv6 has a lot of interest in input from the operator community to make it really a good technology. Now, on top of that, one of the key feedbacks was that the SRv6 sits, they are like 128-bit addresses. And it could potentially, eat and take quite a big chunk from your address space, which is undesirable. As a result of that, so that was again operator feedback, the IETF sort of like grouped again. They sort of like did like a big huddle and they figured out like a solution for that. That has to do with compressed sits. So that is something which was worked upon for many, many years. And only since about like 3 or 4 weeks ago, this document was approved to become an RFC at some point in time. So it is now in the RFC editor queue. So we're doing pretty good. In addition, also a new working group has been started up, which is the SRv6 Ops working group. And this would be an interesting place where operators come together and they all sort of, discuss SRv6 operational experiences, discussing where things went well, discussing where things actually did not go so well, where technology can be improved. And very important of that is that it produces guidelines. And on top of that, it also produces requirements on how to improve the current protocol itself. So by extending it. Now, on top of that, so that's about the SRv6. So I talked a bit longer on that than I was expecting, but that's close to my heart. And there is lots of discussion there. Now, this next topic, M&A, which is the MPLS network actions, has any of you ever heard about this? Or is this new? So who says this is new? I've never heard about this thing. What are you talking about? Okay, one. Who has no clue what I'm talking about? Okay, so we're like split here. Okay, so M&A is, so you have some people who love SRv6 because it uses like IPv6 addresses, but at the same point in time, existing networks, if they provide services, they run on top of MPLS. And changing an MPLS underlay to an SRv6 based underlay does require some actions to take. It's quite a dramatic technology shift. And not all operators are like jumping up and down out of great happiness to do that. So as a result for that, M&A actually has been developed. So what you are doing there is you are backporting SRv6 functionality in MPLS labels. So traditionally, MPLS labels were used to switch the packet with segment routing through the network. Now, what is happening is instead of actually just of only using labels for switching the packets from source to destination, you start to use labels in a post-stack environment to represent certain network actions. So basically doing the same what AZervis6 was doing, but instead of using 128-bit labels, you now use 20-bit labels. So that is, that is what is there, and that is what we're deploying upon. So that about M&A. So that's a big, heavy discussion topic at this point in time in the MPLS working group. We also have, quite a milestone achievement in the multicast area. So we had like IGMP v3 for IPv4. We had MLDB v2 for IPv6. And this actually, went through a milestone from a proposed standard to a full internet standard. Yeah, big, massive success. So now it's a real standard because it has been out there for like many, many years. I was quite happy to be, the area director to be part of that particular milestone journey of the technology. So super happy person. Another area where we have seen quite a dramatic increase of interest is in the data center. So what we have recognized is that within data centers, it may, we have traditionally been using the existing routing technologies like ISAs and BGP and these kind of things. But what we have realized also is that data centers are quite a specific, use case environment from a network perspective. And maybe traditional routing is not good enough because you may potentially have a lot of metadata, going into the, into the thing, lots of resilient, paths between the different layers in the data center, architecture. So that's, we can do better. And that is what we have done. So we developed like two different, new routing protocols. One of them is called Rift, and the other one is LSVR, which is like a BGP-based technology. But instead of doing, I'm getting the signal, I have to be faster. I will go faster. So it's a BGP SPF-based technology, which is different from the link state distance vector kind of behavior. Then the three last topics, I will go a bit quicker on those. Link state routing, we have been optimizing them. And that's mostly about flooding optimizations because traditionally, one of the things which was not really improved over the many years was that, the flooding of IGP items, wasn't really, going that fast. It was very 2000, ish. So we have improved that, in the latest specs. We also are doing lots of enhancements with eVPN, Ethernet VPN. So that's a technology where we are backporting, OZ layer 2 stuff into OSI layer 3, which gives us all sorts of headaches and complex, mechanisms. But, it works very well. It is very good to provide operational services to your customers. So that's a great thing. And then at the end, we also are doing some, BGP optimized path selections. Used colors to actually either give colors towards service functionality in the services area, or we use colors to identify particular, traffic paths as such. So I think we have now the next topic.
So this is what exactly happens when you have heavy routing. Your application layer gets really easy life. So I have been told like I have to do really fast, so I can skip a lot of things, right? So yeah, welcome to the WIT area. And this is a new IETF area that we created. So we merge the previous transport area and application, part of the application real-time area into a new area. And what is you're talking about? You have this IP packet that you care about, right? Mostly sending packets. And this is the IP palette content we're talking about. That's where the WIT area comes into. So you have like web traffic, you have like real-time media traffic or media traffic, and you have this congestion control, quality of service. This is happening in the WIT area. So maybe one thing that you all have heard is like quick protocol, right? So that's the first topic here. So it's an end-to-end encrypted protocol. It's a multiplex protocol, which is basically trying to replace TCP. And this TCP is very close to our heart, right? We have been developing this for more than 25 years. But now we're going to replace TCP with something like QUIC, right? And this kind of like creates some tension of like end-to-end encryption. Looking into if some of us are interested in payload, you will not be able to look at it. But yeah, I mean, there's a solution. There's like sometimes we actually don't need to look at the payload, just to look at like where the packets are going. And right now, the QUIC working group is focusing on the multiple version of it. You have multiple heterogeneous network, you would like to use that one, that's the case. And then we have the mask. So I talked about like QUIC as an encryption protocol, encrypted protocol into encrypted protocol. The idea was like, okay, for many of the cases, you'll be interested on layer 4 matrices, but that's not there in the network, right? So mask, what it allows actually put this QUIC proxy in the network, where you can actually connect, the client connects to this one, the proxy in the network. So at least in the leg that you're operating on, that you actually can know like what is your layer 4 protocol, what's your loss and delay in your particular network path and stuff like that. But on top, one of the main use case for the QUIC was, mask was basically enhanced privacy. Because right now, if you look into Apple's private relay, that's basically a mask protocol deployed. Then other thing that we're doing, like we have this adaptive bitrate application. That's mostly your video or like communication application like Zoom app, and they can adapt, right? And then they usually very reactive to losses and delays. So you have this condition control kicking in. But sometimes what would be interesting, the network to tell the application, hey, this is my idea of like what you can get out of my network. And how it helps and the operators, the network operators, is basically telling like if you have issues, suddenly you have an issue, and you would like to have a fast reaction from the application, you can tell like, hey, this is the bandwidth we're talking about, this is the throughput I am advising, please abide by. So you don't have to actively shape it, like shape the traffic in the network, right? And the application is very receptive to this information because they don't need to add up. Like if I don't have a bandwidth for 4K video streaming, I'll not try it. But right now they don't know. They don't know it until they have tried it. So they try to get 4K video and you have congestion or bandwidth issues in the network. But then you have this oscillating quality of experience behavior that you don't want. And I think this is a win-win thing. The last thing we're happening, I think, is a new working group. And this ISCON, CCWG, there's like when I'm an area director, I'm trying to shepherd those things. Another thing is like congestion control algorithm, right? This is an important thing. We used to be like de facto congestion control algorithm and all this thing, but right now the industry and the research and the understanding of congestion control inherent is so good that you can actually have a standard track congestion control algorithm. That's what we're talking about. I think the next slide is mine as well. So it's supposed to move. This one? Yeah, that's the one. So I'm also supposed to cover this one, right? BOF, like in IETF, I think, thanks for doing a good job on explaining what we do in IETF. So the parts of feather, basically, this is a way of bringing work to the IETF, right? So two things that's going to happen. This BOF going to happen in Bangkok next month is Nasser. Nasser is a network station for secure forwarding. And what it does, we talked about this encryption and all these things, right? So basically what happens, you have this ComSec, which is in the application layer, transport layer somewhere, have the end-to-end security. But then there is a control plane giving a path, you trust the path, right? So there is no information about the transport application layer to know about whether the path of the network the packet is going through is really secure. But now with the increased amount of attacks and all these things, is actually getting more important to know about it. So this is there we're going to work on as a attestation framework, which is basically attesting to a network so that we actually, the truthfulness, trustworthiness of a network element can be realized in the upper layer on the application can say about it. Last, the another happening is symmetric key established and exchange. I think we kind of in love with this asymmetric key thing that we usually use. Everybody understand it, but this has issues like in post-quantum impact of this asymmetric keys, and like it's like a heavyweight processing you need. So symmetric keys actually has those kind of like as a benefit, like they don't have that kind of overhead. They're kind of more easy to handle those algorithms. So the SCAS working group, if this forms, they're going to work on a key exchange mechanism for the symmetric keys, so that we can use this in the protocols with like TLS and MATSEC or like IPsec and those kind of things. So I think that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
So what we will do now is we had a little bit more slides, but these slides will be available offline. So feel free to go over them. We'll actually start with the panel quickly. What I can do is just quickly go through over the slides without presenting. So these are the set of working groups, which are not yet working group yet. They are in the chartering. So if you are interested, these are about digital emblem, and one is about our internal process, which is how we do INA allocations. These are brand new working groups that we have. We'll not go through the list. Look at new work. It's always easier to participate in a new work than a working group that has a lot of history. So that's why we wanted to share one of them, SRV6 Ops. I, in fact, chair that working group, which was mentioned by Gata. That's a new operator-focused working group that might be of interest. And then to the community here in APNIC, there are protocols like RPP, which is about registrars and using REST and JSON. So again, protocol that's very close to how the registries work. Hot topics of operator interest, all the operations stuff, V6 ops, DNS ops, BGP ops, which is basically GROW, RPKI, CIDR ops, network management operations. There is a NMOPS workshop, NEMOPS workshop thing that we did in IAB. We have a separate session of this as well, where we will go up. So network operations, YANG, NetConf, RESTConf remains to be very important. We also have a lot of environmental stuff that is happening across IETF. There's a new working group, there's a new research group, and there is, of course, an IAB program as well. So that remains to be a hot topic. If you are interested in that, come and participate. And bunch of important sessions. All this information is useful for you to look at offline. And if you are planning to come and participate in the IETF, look through these links. And we are here whole week. So talk to us and we can guide you if you have any questions related to IETF. These trends, I think, either after the panel, if we have time, we can go over them, but let's start the panel. That's why we are here. So off to you, our moderator. No, let me quickly go to that slide. Yes.
Thank you, Dhruv. I need higher heels. Okay, so may I invite, please, our distinguished panelists to the stage. You know who you are. Come on, don't be shy. Okay, so while I'm doing that, sorry, while they're getting seated, can we? Okay, I'm Noelle. Thank you for joining us this morning. So, I am joined by a distinguished group of gentlemen. Experts, rather, let's call them experts, who are very embedded in this community, but at the same time also very actively participating in at the Can I just take this? Okay, there we go. Whew. My throat was getting strained. I was starting to feel like an ostrich. All right. So we have a wide range of expertise, not only on stage, but also on the floor. So this should make for a very interesting discussion this morning. And you all know the title of the topic that we're discussing today. And from the presentations earlier, you pretty much have a sense of why we're here this morning. So Asia Pacific in particular, we are an innovation powerhouse. We export our technical expertise, our tech talent. We have thriving technical communities as we're seeing this week. And we also have some of the top-notch research institutions in the region. At the same time, for a region that that holds 60% of the global population. As you saw earlier in one of Drew's slides, our representation or presence in the IETF is less than 20%. So there's a big discrepancy there. We've done a quick study of the operator community globally, and it more or less has a similar a similar proportion of representation in the IETF. So a very important segment of our community, technical community, is somewhat still merits further, rather a larger presence and larger participation at the IETF. So we at the Internet Society we have close relations to the IETF. We, as you saw earlier in one of Drew's slides, again, the IETF through the Internet Architecture Board informs the work of the Internet Society, and we also are at the Internet Society active promoters of the IETF's work and the IETF's output. So at some point in time, we did look into this. Why do we see relatively low participation amongst operators at the open standards development processes? And we found that of the operators we surveyed, only half, half were not participating in the IETF at all. And only 18% of those participating were actively participating in either the mailing lists or in-person meetings or both. So why is this? Also noting, I should say that there was about 80% of everyone surveyed they felt that the IETF was relevant to their work, and they did want to participate, and yet there's very low participation. So what's going on? We did look into the reasons, of course. Just a few of the reasons that were mentioned were time. So first, we all have day jobs, we all have personal lives, and operators felt that they didn't have enough time to substantially participate in the discussions at IETF. Another factor was money. So it does cost to participate in meetings, as we know, and there was a lack of either financial support or just financial ability to be able to participate in at the IETF. We'll address many of these points in the panel. Another one was culture. So there was an impression that amongst some operators that they didn't feel welcome at the IETF, that their input was not welcome. There was also a language barrier dimension in that a lot of the drafts and a lot of the discussions were conducted in English. And lastly, just awareness. So while a lot of operators knew about the IETF, there was not a lot of awareness on what kind of work was going on currently at the IETF, or just they didn't know how to join. So with that, I think that gives a good context to our discussion. What I would like to emphasize, though, we are don't feel intimidated by the room. We would like for this to be an interactive discussion, and ultimately, we would like for you to come out of this room at the top of the hour. First of all, alive, but second, to feel encouraged that you are able to to join the IETF and to participate in the IETF more easily than you thought. All right, with that, yes, of course.
Operators. So you surveyed operators?
Yes, we surveyed operators. Yes, but we would like thank you.
Internet Society did this thing which was published in one of the internet drafts as well. So this is like what we are talking about, like 10 years ago, the survey where they went to all the operator communities, not the people who were just coming to the IETF, because that's a very small sample. That will not make sense. So actually going out to the operators who are not coming. So yeah.
Thanks for further contact, Drew. Yes, This was a decade ago. That's another qualifier. So one of the objectives of this panel is really to try and get a sense of where we are now. There's been a lot of changes in the operator community. The IETF has also evolved. So where are we at, as the kids say these days? Okay, with that, I will pose the first question to Dhruv, unless there are questions from the. Oh, actually, let's get a temperature for the room first. Who among you are currently subscribed to an IETF mailing list? Okay, quite a few. Yeah, quite a few. And who in this room have previously attended an in-person IETF meeting? Okay, very encouraging. Raj, don't be shy. And finally, who among you have not heard of the IETF before today? No. You're right. You're one. Okay. Okay.
Welcome.
So don't worry. I hope by the end of the session that will change. Already changing, hopefully. Okay. So to Dhruv, the IETF holds 3 meetings, 3 in-person meetings every year, and the first is in Asia. The first is actually going to be in Bangkok next month. How do we encourage more operators in Asia Pacific not only to participate in the face-to-face meetings in Asia Pacific, like the one in Bangkok, but also the work that's happening in between? And if you could tell us as well about the work that's happening in between.
Yeah, so one thing that we always do is connect with the local regional communities. That has always helped. So for instance, when I started participating at IETF and I was not seeing that much participation from India, Mohit and some of us worked together in setting up a small organization with the idea that we need to build community. Even what Dirk was saying, I'm saying Dirk, even at the past keynote, the idea of in our community, how this whole idea of connections and networking is so important. And when we get that, it's easier for folks to come and participate. So even building those local communities was our key activities that we did. And outreach early, even when we are thinking of ITF meeting in our part of region, and sometimes we go to new regions as well. So it's important to start very early with outreach, reaching to right set of people. This is where ISOC chapters, APNIC foundations, folks in the room, everybody coming together and building a sense of things. Now, within the if you ask me specifically, not just looking at the regional point of view, but from operators' point of view. From operators' point of view, I think there is a little bit of myths as well that, oh, my participation is not as important when we think of operators. So changing that slowly, explaining to them that, look, this is how it's a good idea of in the past where an operator has participated and why did they come to participate. So sometimes we make a pitch saying, come and participate, but it has to be of value to them. So explaining how would it be useful for you to participate, how it helps you to run your networks better, those kind of cases are very useful. Sometimes folks come to our leadership and complain about the protocol. And that's when you tell them that this complaint is not going to change anything. If you want something to change, you have to show up in the room. That's how IETF works. So explaining that helps. Would anybody wants to add?
So I think you covered it quite a lot, right? So I mean, that's the essence. I mean, if you have problems, basically what we are asking, so the operators, they actually have operational experience, right? They run the network, right? So this should not be about like, okay, we don't have time, so we cannot come, or this is not our priority. The standard is not our priority. We don't create a standard, but just giving that coming to IETF and talking about their problems, actually will allow the other engineers to actually look into those things. For example, I mean, if I be very regional about it, I mean, even if like we're talking about same kind of protocol all over the world, but when you are deploying a network in Asia and Africa and Europe, you have a different kind of constraints. You have different kind of things that you should look at. And maybe some of during the design process, the development process of a standard in IETF, we didn't really thought about something that it could pop up. So those kind of things should come in, and that's why they what Drew was saying, like the regional participation, going, telling them, even not only the operators to the policymakers. I think this is really important for us, and we should start, as he said, really early. So that's what I would kind of add.
All right. So now we've gotten to the first step of getting them in the room, right? But there's also a perception that operators' views are somehow sidelined in the process. And how do we then how do we make sure that once the operators have given their input, that this input is actually considered in the IETF? And this is for Gunther and Zahat.
Understand.
Okay. So I think actually, one of the elements you should not forget is, the amount of, experience and you have, as a human capital here. So the IETF is very good in inventing new things, and it is not always certain if these new things work very well in your environments. And it's very important to have like a feedback loop on what is happening, over there. So for example, so at some point in time, like in one of my working groups, like in the link state routing, so this is technology which works upon like the IGPs, like for ISAS. And I touched upon that a little bit earlier today. So the original specification of ISAS is about like 15 or 20 years old. And some of those things actually haven't really been changed. Now, what operators were seeing is like, hey, my vendors, they're not really following the spec here anymore. So the spec actually says, you're allowed to send like 10 link state packets per second, but vendor X allows to send 500, vendor Y allows to send like 1,000. And so they come to us like, hey, you IETF, you are the standardization body. What's going on here? Everybody is not doing what you're saying, so please fix it, suck it up and, fix this thing. So we started to look into that, and we started to develop like, on a more standardized way of increasing the speed of these flooding updates, for example. Another element actually has, another example of what we have seen is to do with Azure v6. So one of the big benefits of Azure v6 is the promise that it can scale to very large numbers because you can use aggregation. So which means like, you can aggregate like many Azure v6, located prefixes into another one if you send a route to another area. That's really good because you have, instead of like 100 single prefixes in the first area, it will be represented by one single aggregated prefix in another area. But if you're a networking engineer, then you realize that if you aggregate, you also lose a little bit of information, because if one of the aggregates in the first area sort of like, is removed or dies, for example, the people who only have the aggregate are completely unaware of that. No, that's very important, because if you're unaware of something goes away, a service, for example, you cannot react upon that. So again, it was like, okay, SFX scales very well, but my convergence times goes from like milliseconds to like minutes, which is unacceptable. And for that, to fix that, we actually looked into it again, and we developed like another technology. We expanded like, the classical IGP routing mechanisms to, instead of announcing reachability to a particular destination, to also advertise unreachability to a certain destination. Another thing is to do with like IPv6 security. So if you actually have been implementing IPv6 in your infrastructure, then it's like a whole new technology here. And if you introduce something new, so fundamental, as moving from v4 to IPv6, or just simply adding IPv6 on your infrastructure, you need to be aware of like how to secure that thing also. So, and that has been quite a big journey, in the IETF. It's a draft we have now. it's now published as an RFC not that long ago, but it has been worked upon for more than 10 years, more than a decade. And that is because initially the adoption of IPv6 in your network infrastructure wasn't really, very fast. But the more and more people started to, implement IPv6, the more and more experience grew, the more and more we saw people, doing like malicious things to IPv6, trying to penetrate your network, the more and more experience grew. And the document always got, improved and improved and improved. So over the span of 10 years, we now actually have like quite a good IPv6 security document, which was solely written by operators. And it is actually referenced quite a lot, and I think it is really an important document. If you implement IPv6 in your network environment, be aware of that one. So looking into the bigger picture for this is that, the IETF wants to create like new technology, but it has to be deployable. And it has to be stable. It has to be scalable. It has to be interoperable with, with everybody else on the planet, between vendors and between operators. And for that, we need your experience. We need your feedback in that. So during the development of the standard, come and speak to us, and say, okay, this thing is like that thing has to be improved. The scale of something, it has to work properly when you implement it like in 2 instances, but it has to work properly also if you implement it like in 1,000 instances. We don't always, because we tend to be like very, tunnel focused. We develop a technology and we don't really look into like how it actually has to be used. We tend to forget about that sometimes. And then it is very important to get like operator input to put us back onto the right track and potentially to, to make some changes. So
yeah, I think again, I mean, you did it quite a good job. So I mean, shall we take the question first, or like shall I add on?
Taking the question, Ole?
Or maybe I can finish, and then you can share. So I mean, what I can add on is like, I mean, obviously I understand like sometimes these are the feelings like from the operators, like, okay, we are not that much in, like, I mean, we already heard like, okay, operators do not go to IT, but let me give you a couple of examples where like operators has picked up. I talked about the WIT area, right? The application layer, transport layer. So for example, one topic I can talk about is L4S. So this is like transport protocol kind of thing. Well, people didn't care about it, right? But now the operators are making effort to actually deploy the L4S, because the L4S technology gives a low latency, low loss, right? That's the ultimate goal of our building this network. Like, we don't want to lose packets, we don't want to delay packets, and this is the where the operators picks up, and they are making marketing out of it, right? Then I hinted about the MASP protocol. I mean, they are defining a quick proxy in the network, and then it comes to operation experience and performance. I mean, whether this is gonna perform enough for you to actually take advantage of it, like SCOAN protocol, it's trying to get a throughput advice to the application. I mean, is it like really doable? I mean, how much information you are willing to send and can send, and what information is important for the applications to take care of it. And so from that point of view, what I see also, like kind of like echoing what Gunther said, is like nowadays we're building new technologies where the operator's input, the operator's experience is becoming more important than before, because we want these protocols to be deployed to solve our problem, not to create more problems, right? And these are the operator communities is basically deploying those technologies. Even if like we're working on application layer, network layer, or like different layering thing, I think the barrier between different layers is really getting blurred. Like what is like the cross layer thing? I mean, it might have been a taboo, but now this is not a taboo. This is kind of normal. Like if you go into the mass SCOAN, you'll see what I'm talking about. So I think 3 things I'd like to say, like, yeah, bring your problems to IETF, even if you don't have a solution. Talk with the leadership, IETF leadership, because sometimes it's like, for me, like I'm really pushing for the SCOAN working to work with the stakeholders, and the stakeholders, network operators, operations, application provider, content provider. So talking with working with chairs, area directors, or leadership, or like very meritorious people, participants in IETF, it actually helps to bring your voice heard. So you can actually, if you're not going, you can make it here by talking with those people, right? The third thing is like offers, we already said, like operation experience, you have real-time experience, so bring that up and help creating the protocol that is deployable. Yeah.
Ollie.
Want me to use the microphone or?
Yeah.
hang on. Let me try to run.
Want to hear what I'm saying. So I am glad to hear that operators were involved. I think you said exclusively involved in writing this one document, right? Is that what you said, Gunter?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great, but that's the exception, not the rule, right, in the IETF. And so I think the challenge, whether we're talking about the IETF worldwide or Asia Pac, is to reach exactly the right people who have the spare time to be involved in the input in the kitchen while the pudding is being developed, and have the patience to understand that this is a long-term process. An IETF draft takes a couple of years typically to mature into something that can be deployed. Versus if you look at the people who attend the NANOG conference, they come in Sunday night and they're expected to leave by Wednesday lunchtime because they used to have pagers. I guess now they don't. They have the equivalent of a pager, so they can be reached at any time of the night when a router crashes or something happens, right? So their operational responsibility is completely different from what you really, why they should care about the IETF or why you should care about them to some extent. But it's important that we all talk to each other in the process of developing these standards and making them deployable, which has always been a legitimate criticism of the IETF. I think like, why aren't we using IPv6? Well, because it's damn hard to deploy or transition to. And I suppose that if we'd had more operator presence in the development, we might have ended up in a different world in that sense. So that's all I wanted to say about this. Is a generic thing. Whether it applies more or less to Asia is another discussion. But anyway.
Yeah. So to respond to that one, I mean, I think that's a very good point, right? I mean, we have different kind of setup, interest and goals. And IETF process, or any standard process, a long-term thing. I mean, if you look into SDOs, they have like releases going on. So in IETF, we kind of like more do like this. We don't have the release version, but definitely that's the thing. But another point you made, like the operations, that's what we're talking about. And what I'm trying to say is like, okay, two things, again, is if you have internet connection and email address, you can be a participant in IETF. You don't need to be affiliated by somebody. So if you are a technologist, you care about improvement, you can actually go without really any affiliation. Like you can do it as an individual, right? That's one thing. And the other thing is like, the understanding of process, right? How you that's what I said before. Like you have the problem, your router crash for a particular reason, or like you have 500 versus 1,000 messes kind of in the standard. You have problems. You get that voice heard to the IETF. I think you don't need to be completely into the standard making process, but if we know what you are dealing with, what's your problem, I'm pretty sure we have very excellent experts in IETF who can take care of it. So please come and talk with us.
Just to add to that, like, to the operators, our pitch is always not to say that you come and write our documents. It's just participate in a light way. You participate in NANOG list. You know how to do mailing list. It's not something like even apricot list. Participate in DNS ops or the ops community things that you are aware of, and just give us your problem. Don't come and worry too much that you need to do a lot of works. And that's the perception that to do anything in IETF, I need to actually write a document. Of course, that helps. But by building the right set of connections and getting that my input is important and it is reaching to the right ears, you can actually still make a big impact on IETF process as well.
All right. Oh, yes, please. Hang on. Getting a lot of exercise today.
Okay, I'm Singley from CERNET. And actually, we participate in IETF. We operate China Education
Thank you.
Research Network. I have two experiences. One is actually in IETF, there are ops. For example, the IPv6 ops or DNS ops. That's very important. That's actually for operators. You can raise your problems and something. And when they're really interested on that, That's the first thing. So maybe ISP can participate in NOx for, ops first, whatever. Second, because we are also doing some administrative work for Cernet. And actually we set some kind of KPI for operators. So if they can write a draft, we give them credits. That's the thing to encourage the NOx to participate in IETF. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So one quick add-on to what Ole and what you also were saying is that, so the IETF is, you can look into it as being divided into like two different kind of like groups. So one part is like operational focus groups where majority of the people actually are coming from the ops environment, from operators. And that is where you can definitely make like, like a massively big impact. Now, the other part are like, the people working on the specifications. Now, majority of the people in there, they come from vendors or they come from people actually who write actually the software code as such. Now, what we have seen historically is that the input from operators is, that they don't really always, function in, or like, provide like lots of feedback in there. And I don't know, the reason is a little bit like, unknown. I think it is more, coming from the fact that they don't feel comfortable, speaking up their mind in front of the people who actually are writing the code as such. But you should not forget, I think, especially in that area, your input is very, very important, because you're going to be the one voice who, sort of like gives, shines the light at the end of the tunnel to get a particular solution implemented and deployed out there. Because if you come to the stage like, so like, this is wonderful, this thing looks beautiful, but how the heck am I going to implement this thing, with the requirements you have? It's going to be impossible. So yeah, so I think that is, yes.
Okay, I'm Alice from Huawei Cloud. So I will offer a case from cloud. Cloud is the infrastructure of the network. So we found a case, one app used by IPv6 will use more than 10% traffic than IPv4. So that is a quite large cost for the cloud infrastructure. I think what will the operator can do with this extra cost to encourage the cloud or the app to use IPv6 than IPv4? Okay, yes, we can see from the cloud, the IPv6 can use more than 10% traffic than IPv4.
Anybody else, or should I? Okay, let me try to answer this one. So implementing a new technology, it often comes with a cost. Now, the question is always, is the cost which is presented to you, is it worth, the additional service, or like, service actually it provides? Because it's always a balance of finding your way, because, this extra cost of traffic may give you like more optimized, a network infrastructure, because a V6 address tends to be cheaper than a V4 address. You have many more of them. On top of that, you can be a bit more creative in the way you potentially architect your infrastructure. Because in IPv6, you can do like a lot more aggregation than you do in the IPv4, network environment. Now, but it also, again, like IPv6 again comes with another cost, because you have like a new technology, you have to maintain that thing. Your operator, the people operating your network must learn about IPv6. A lot of it is similar, but not to the full. And that little bit of difference gives you quite a big potential risk, because if it looks the same and doesn't really behave the same, it opens up, security, issue doors and things like that. So yeah, there is always like a cost in there, but again, it's a balance. So if this cost means that you're still going to exist in about 3 years' time, I'm pretty happy you're going to be, happy to absorb the particular cost. Because if you don't make the expense, and then in 3 years you potentially are like, out of business, that is not very good either. It's better to pay the 10% tax now. So
this could also, Mohit, why don't you want to tell us, like, Mohit worked on IPv6 in his campus, so you can share, why did you do it? Like, what was the value that you saw?
Yeah, sure. So so I'm from NITK Surathkal, it's a national institute in India. So we wanted to simplify our network architecture. It was becoming overly complicated because we had more than 25,000 to 30,000 devices in the campus, and management was becoming pretty challenging. So that was one of our major motivation to go to IPv6, and I'll talk about that. But coming to your point, on the cloud part, right? I mean, yes, the expenses can, I mean, as you said, it's a bit of an overhead. I agree with what our panelists has already mentioned. But I'd like to add the context of IETF here, because that's what we are referring to. And I'll say one thing, one case study that happened. So while we were working with IPv6, we touched upon the extension headers, and our team of students was involved in implementing an extension header. When we were doing the testing across different CDN providers, we actually came across a CDN provider where our extension headers were getting dropped. And we had no clue as to why these extension headers are getting dropped. Fortunately, in one of the IETF meetings, I had sent 2 of my girl students. And when they went to IETF, we met the person from that CDN who was attending the IETF meeting. And we went and just casually said, that, we were doing experiments with IPv6 extension headers, and we see your network is not accepting that. And thanks to Dhruv and Nalini, who is also a mentor for us on the IPv6, they spoke to the CDN provider and he said, I'm happy to let you know. And then he came and he said, there's a policy that blocks the extension headers in our network, but I'm happy to open it up for you so that you can do the testing. So that's the power of, meeting people at IETF. I mean, just because we were at IETF, my students were at IETF, we got to talk to the CDN operator, and they kind of relaxed that. And they said, please do the testing and let me know. And if it works well, then we are happy to open it up for others. So yeah, it can be an overhead, like you said, but it also is a plus point. And if we, sync up at IETF and talk to each other, operators, academicians, other people, policymakers, I think we can do more experiments openly and try making things work.
This is Amrish from ISOC. Actually, my first question might be to us, ISOC, like maybe we should run this survey again to understand what are the new dynamics there, and maybe understand more the demographics, not in terms of gender or location, but more like are those operational engineers, or those deployment engineers, or those research engineers? Who are they? Who are the sort of people participating, so that we understand, okay, who could we send in those meetings? So I think maybe another survey could be useful in the future. My second point would be touching on the operators side, and perhaps why they are not sending people. Definitely, if you're a small operator, you're already overwhelmed by operations. I don't think you have time and bandwidth to invest in research and do standards work. And maybe what's probably happening is that those small operators are actually just contacting their vendor if they have an operational challenge. They are not actually, or maybe they don't know that they could also go through the IETF, but perhaps going through channeling everything through the vendor. I don't know if is that a problem, or is that the right way to do it? I don't know.
So I think there is a truth in it. Like when you said, like the operators are channeling through the vendors, I think, and that's actually, I don't think that's the problem. That's kind of healthy. Like we vendors also know about the problems firsthand, and you can solve it. And you can also tell, hey, there is a standard that can solve it, or like come up with a solution, right? But that doesn't stop the operators to actually coming to IETF. I mean, because their views from when they're talking with a vendor, with one vendor, or like multiple vendors, they have different kind of portfolio, different kind of features. But when they're coming to IETF, we're talking about a standard, right? We're not talking about a particular product that I have sold to you. And that actually the essence of the standard, right? I mean, if you have a multi-vendor deployment operations, you like to don't talk with like 3-4 vendors. Perhaps you can come and talk with IETF Obviously, you can talk with vendors to come to IETF, but you need a standard solution you need to talk about it. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, I mean, it doesn't hurt, but it would be very helpful to actually get a first-hand experience in the IETF.
And we hope that operators are talking to other operators as well, and that's where more frank this thing happens. Like moment you talk to vendors, we know what vendor's job is to sell a box, and they'll prioritize over everything else. So the answers that you get in an ITF context are different than the answers that you're going to get when you're having a vendor negotiation.
Yeah, so I would like to echo what these two have been explaining, and I see in this also little like some benefits from an operational operator perspective. So I have, for example, when I go to IETF, so I'm also, my own company, I'm also a product manager for certain technologies. I kind of like decide what is going to happen. So, and that is often should I say the word abused by operators. They actually are aware of that. So if they come to IETF, they can actually talk to me on these things and get like a semi-informal kind of update on some new things which are coming, or they explain me the problems they're experiencing. So I can actually implement those things in my own product line as such. Now, sometimes I have like a few operators who gang up together on me on some pushing certain things because I was sort of like not willing to do that. And after the discussion, actually, I sort of agreed with them. So I think that is an interesting, aspect also. So it gives you, even if you're like a small operator, an opportunity to speak to some people of influence and other companies on getting things done. You don't have to go, through your local representative who has maybe no clue where are the product managers somewhere out for that particular company, or it will take them a very long time to sort of like ripple the message through. And maybe they're explaining your problem in the wrong way to the, to the person who can do it. It's better to actually speak directly. So yes, that does happen. Some of the operators who go to IETF, they do have my phone number under their speed dial. If something goes wrong, they give me a call. Most of the time at night. Unavoidable. And that is reality. So I think it's a win-win. For me, it's actually very important to hear from operators what they actually want to achieve, what they want to do, which may not always be aligned with my own, opinion as such. But it is important because it helps me guide, technology through in a certain way.
I just want to just give you a reminder saying like, okay, you don't need to come to IETF meetings to participate, right? You can send email. You can talk with the leadership. But that's what I'm talking about. Like you have internet connection and email address that you can connect to, and you can use those tools to start the discussion, getting hold of Gunther, not in the nighttime, but perhaps in the, via the email mailing list.
Yeah, and also can I add one thing? And of course, this kind of apricot, APNIC, and also the several meetings, the several operators presenting their trials or experiment in there. As also, there's several problems there, but this NOG or this operators community presentation, this still problem is the problem or the problem with several workaround. But this, of course, the standardization, the specs about the RFC is some kind of limitation about the technology or the technical things, but it can be fixed. But inside the NOG meeting, so we can contact the several vendors, but of course, the exact the implementation people going to the IETF. So we can feedback to, of course, we can feedback several problem to the vendors, but we can directly contact with the implementation or the developer in the IETF. So this is a little bit different communication with the operators and the developers, I think.
Hello, this is Kausar. I am from Bangladesh. I am a journalist. So I am a journalist, but I also involved with the ISOC Bangladesh and BDNOG. So my question is to the panel is there any opportunity to engage with the IETF or join in the IETF meeting of the policymakers or journalists like us? How can they relate the IETF meetings?
So let me add to that. And IAB does some of this with ISOC as well. So as I was saying, of course, our main work is protocols. That's what we do. But there is a lot more side activities as well. So for instance, in research groups, especially, we have various research groups like Human Rights and Policy Consideration, HRPC, Gaia, which is actually very close to ISOC, which is about connecting the unconnected. So there are various other venues alongside IETF protocol works where such conversations are happening. And where we have folks who have been tech journalists who have come and talked to us in IAB Open, in IRTF Open. So if you are, IETF is not going to gate check like, are you an engineer? Then only you are an IETF person. Anybody is welcome and anybody can join the mailing list and can participate in our processes as well. And in fact, IETF does realize in the current climate, we have to be open to get feedback from policymakers, end users, people who are not technical as well, but they should be allowed to participate in a process as well. And we get inputs from them that we add on to. Ola, would you like to add? Make sure, Raj.
So I have attended a total of 110 IETF meetings in person out of the 121 that there's been. And I have to say that these efforts to mentor people, to give them guidance, to basically have them there as observers, I think is really what you're looking for when it comes to the operator community, because kind of really depends on what you mean by participate in, because IETF isn't like an organization where you walk in and you start doing the work. I mean, you have a lot of background and reading the documents to get you before you get there isn't going to be all that helpful. It's going to get you a start. But so all these programs that you've talked about that ISOC is involved in, and everyone is basically welcome as observers. There's no problem with that. You don't have to have any credentials to be at an IETF, trust me. Yeah. But whatever we can do to make them feel welcome, I think is very important.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the part. That's what you said, like feeling welcomed. I think I also seen like journalists coming to IETF. I mean, as an area director, I got interviewed by like different kind of journalists, and what they wanted to do, they wanted to actually see like where the technology is going, because it's as like Dhruv said, like this is not only about a standard that we create lots of other conversations in IETF. And as a journalist, as a like technology enthusiast, you are more than welcome to join. As Ole mentioned, you don't need to be a credit, and I mentioned you don't need to be affiliated with something. So just come by and talk with people, and you'll see like where the standard, where the internet is heading, and that's perhaps something very beneficial for your articles.
Thanks for that. So, Raj, you've done a bit of, a fair bit of IETF outreach and engagement in your time. And we've seen that clearly there is value to participating at the IETF for operators. And we do have some portions of Asia Pacific already participating in IETF, but this is still largely uneven. From your experience, what can you say about the dynamics behind this rather unevenness of participation?
So I think, and look, after this comments, I need to leave. I have got a meeting to get to at 11, so I will leave straight after, if you don't mind, please. So I think we need to be very mindful of what the premise is in that question, right? I'm just hearing all of our panelists and particularly our IETF friends. It's very clear that you want people to come and participate, but have you put yourselves in other people's shoes on why can't they come and participate, right? There's been all sorts of things talked about. I mean, Mohit gave a great example when he sent some of his team to an IETF meeting. The fact is, the physical IETF meetings also allow you human connections, right? You can talk to people and get stuff done. I know a lot of the work at the IETF happens on mailing lists. Of course it does. But someone diving into a mailing list where conversation is already in motion, it's very hard to actually cope with what's happening there. I don't know. If I go back 20 odd years, when I first started to understand what the IETF was, I said, right? Okay. So you got to keep that in mind. Bringing the conversation back to what the topic was, and in particular where we are in the Asia Pacific, you also have to realize, and to our IETF friends in particular, as an example, your registration fee, I think, is $875 US, so it's about that, right? That is the monthly salary for an engineer in a large part of this region, right? We haven't yet added the travel costs, the accommodation, the meals, and whatever else maybe. That's one side, so that's the cost side. The other bit is, when we talk about small operators in the region, and I think Amrish mentioned this, they're more focused on operations than doing anything else, right? It's also the case that you've got certain staff who are key personnel in that organization. Either they go and fix a router that's not working or switches that have broken down, or they go and spend a week traveling to IETF. It's not an easy choice for small operators. The other thing, I asked one of my team to pull out some stats, which was quite interesting for me. So don't hold me to these. There's probably, I hope it's not 10 years old, but so what I was told was that there are 5 countries from APAC in the top 15 in terms of RFC authors by country. China, Japan, India, Australia, South Korea. India, we know in the last few years, there's been a greater level of interest. Dhruv and others work in India has perhaps led to that. But China and Japan, if you look at where they come from, here are the names: Huawei, FutureWay, ZTE, Tsinghua, NTT, KDDI, NEC, Fujitsu, Keio. Right. So these are mature, well-resourced entities from an advanced economy who can invest in these things because they want to look at the future, right? Not what's happening now. So I think there's this divide that exists, and then I think sometimes we forget that there's certain implications for someone to come and not just attend a physical IETF meeting, but be a part of the mailing list discussions, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I would say, there was this discussion about NetOps and this mailing lists, and you need to reach out. Maybe the IETF in general could do a little bit more work in engaging with the NOG lists in various regions, right? I sit on a lot of those NOG lists in silent observer mode. I hardly hear things like this. You're all very passionate here today trying to convince us in the room to join, but maybe that needs to happen on those mailing lists, right? And including giving examples like, okay, you can go and talk to your vendor because they might have a contractual obligation, a support contract maybe, if something's broken. But at the same time, the coders, the implementers, who come to you, right? So maybe there's some potential way to merge those two and take a hybrid approach. But awareness, I think, is a big, big problem. And that's something that I think needs to be addressed. What the solution is, I don't know. That's something I think we need to thresh out. But yeah, my apologies. I need to leave.
I was going to drill you more, but
Okay. I'll give you 2 minutes.
Okay, just one more. So APNIC is very technically minded, but also very development minded. And
2 organizations, but yes.
oh, sorry, APNIC Foundation. Could you share a little bit more about what the foundation, what APNIC Foundation is doing in this space? I know you do a lot of capacity building as well.
So we have our own programs, of course, which look at capacity building. But beyond that, we have grants program that people, for example, Mohit, the project he described, we funded that project, right? It was a grant from us when they turned the campus into IPv6. But the other thing we did at the last IETF meeting in March in Brisbane, and because that's where we located, the Australian government was very interested in seeing how they could improve Australian participation in the IETF. And I think Paresh was part of a group too, if I'm not mistaken. So when the Australian government decided to stump up with some cash, we said, okay, we'll match you for that. You support all the Australians, and we'll bring people from outside Australia to go and participate in the IETF. I think for just about everyone we sent, it was the first IETF meeting. The reason we did that was what I mentioned before about the human connections you need to make, right? I mean, I completely agree we can do a lot of things on the internet, but human connections is what makes the world run, right? It has for millennia, and it will into the future, unless AI takes over, but that's a different conversation. And so, we would like to continue doing that sort of work, but there's one problem with continuing that sort of work. It's a thing called money, right? So there needs to be some, we have a little bit we can perhaps throw into it, but it's not going to be enough to do what we would like to do. So if there are people, companies, organizations, entities interested in level or stepping up IETF involvement from this region, come and talk to us. And let's see if we can knock something together. Thank you. And my apologies, I need to go. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Raj. So we're wrapping up actually. We have a few minutes left, and I suppose this is the time to be asking you, as a takeaway for the room, what is your top tip? So coming from academia, coming from your own sectors, what is your top tip for anyone who has maybe participated in the past, wants to participate again, or if it's their first time to participate, to just get oriented in the IETF's work, or get caught up, or other resources that they can tap into, whether it's financial, I don't know if we can address time, but resources that are available to them. The top tip that you can give, just one.
Start from.
So one tip that I'll give, I'm from academia, so I would just say that it's high time that academia starts participating in IETF. Particularly, we have been participating in IETF in terms of implementing the internet drafts and giving early feedback to the authors of the internet draft, telling them what we find challenging to implement so that they could actually incorporate that feedback much before actually it becomes an RFC.
Okay, so I'm also kind of the academia, but some several working for about the operational things, and also it's good to having the feedback to the specs or the RC or the country discussing the working group is very important to joining the IETF discussion, and also of course in-person meeting is important, but it's a kind of almost similar things about this kind of apricot or nox or something. So if of course we want to attend all of the working group session on the both of everything, but if it's possible, so you can attending the one-day pass, purchasing the one-day pass to attend the IETF, or the attending the remotely. It's a good thing good way to attending the IETF.
Yeah, my final thought actually, for more contribution in the IETF is to really clarify that the IETF is really contributor driven. So from an area director perspective, what I like to see is if you come to actually join the conversation, share your experience, team up with your peers over there, if because you will have the opportunity. Review and give feedback on the different documents, specifications, and operational experiences, and then finally also do engage with the IETF leadership, because your experience may cause documents to become better and the output to become more relevant for your use cases.
Yeah, thanks. The thing that I would like to add is, like, to IETF, it's the entry point is going to be different for each individual. There is no one path that can be laid out. Some people start with IRTF if they are researchers. Some people who are implementing and working on open source start participating in IETF via hackathon process. Some people have an idea, they have already written a draft. Some people are just interested and they just show up, and that's all completely fine. They are all valuable contribution. Sometimes we look at, like, way we measure IETF participation. Some people look at numbers that, like we were talking about, which companies have written the RFCs. That's just one metric. It's not the way for us to look at that. That is the only way to participate. There are people who are in leaderships who have contributed to IETF and have never written a document, and that's completely fine. Just being on the mailing list, providing their inputs, and in fact reviewing other people's output is a much more valuable contribution than just going with, this is my individual draft. All I'm here for is push for that individual draft, and then I'm going to not look at anything. That's not valuable participation. The important thing is also to realize is, once you are part of the working group, you have to let go of this is my idea. You are now part of a working group process. It's consensus driven. You should represent the consensus of the room. So that breakage, that's an art that you have to learn over time, and you have to be open. You are here not just to push for your ideas, but to get feedback from other people, and not be afraid to get, oh, why am I getting so many review comments? That's why you are there. You want those comments right there so that you can fix together and get the best solution out for our industry. So that mindset also needs to come in.
So my top tip is like listen to these guys. so that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean you can start as academia. If you are academia, you can start. I mean I have said talk with professors who run networking course and they don't know what IETF is. I have heard from Raj like okay we have issues with NOCs, not really discussing what IDP is. We have seen from the participation, so like from audience, like, okay, we have a different kind of like goal. So what would really important here is like to come and talk. If there is a like, if IETF leadership can improve something to bring the awareness, come and talk. If you don't understand the standards, the process, come and talk. If you don't know like what IETF contribution is, yeah, writing an email, perhaps also an IETF contribution. So when you're talking about contribution, come and talk, and come and listen and observe. And I think together we can make internet better. That's the IETF we're talking about, right? Thank you.
All right, I think that's a good note to end in. Know that you have resources here. They're here all week and they're here at Apricot. So if you do want to tap on those resources, they're here. And hopefully this session has somehow lowered the barriers for operators in the room to participate, not just operators, of course, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this session. I hope this has been useful, and I wish you the enjoy the rest of your week in Malaysia, and have a safe trip home. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Noel, for moderating. The slides are hopefully going to be there. There were some things that we were not able to present, but all that is very useful information, especially if you are planning to attend the Bangkok meeting, even remotely. And in fact, sometimes that I say, start with a remote participation. It's much easier that you understand how the things work rather than landing up directly at the IETF meeting and getting a full-blown experience directly. Start with the premiere first. And it's good to attend remotely, and fee waivers are available. So anybody can participate remotely. So hope to see you at Bangkok meeting. Thank you so much.